Hello and welcome everyone to week 7 of Mastering Self, where we are step by step revealing intrinsic well-being. And when we say we, it's each and every one of you with the self-application that are doing the work, revealing that intrinsic well-being for yourselves. And so in week 7, we're going to be exploring quadrants, the integral quadrants, and our native perspectives. Super fun session. Tune in and receive all of the goodness that this session has to offer. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which I and Sarah are calling from, the Arakwal people, and the traditional custodians of the land from which everyone is calling from. Recognizing their continued connection to land, water, and community, and paying our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And so today's session will kick off with, rather than a review, more so a reflection of the last 7 days, post-integration session, what's been coming up for you, and then we'll move into this week's content around quadrants, the integral quadrants, and exploring those native perspectives and seeing where each of us are seeing and spending most of our time seeing from. Then we'll move into some integral health and well-being work around the nervous system, and then delving into the I space with attention versus awareness discussions. And your facilitators for today are myself and Marion Giddy, and then Lawrence and Sarah will be jumping in during the discussions. And so let's take a moment. Closing our eyes, getting comfortable, wriggling around to get comfortable, but also just simply wriggling around to wriggle the day out, or simply wriggle our way into the day. Taking a deep breath in and all the way out. Through the nose. Really simply allowing every breath out to be slightly slower than the last. Through the nose, with the Ujjayi breath, a firmer breath through the nose, mouth closed, tongue gently rested on the roof of your mouth, whilst your jaw is open and lips sealed. Allowing for open awareness. No need to latch on to any one thing that arises within your awareness. As your breath continues to gently slow down, noticing any tension that may still be held in and around the eyes, face, forehead, jaw, shoulders. Letting that tension melt away. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. returning to the breath. The final 3 breaths, being with those breaths fully, all the way, every step of the way, being with that breath, all the way out as they make the turn, all the way in as they make the turn. Go for it. When you're ready, gently opening your eyes. And for those that are using the calendar, you can put 2 crosses down for today if you've already done your sitting. And so, reflecting on the last 7 days, what have you noticed? What have you been noticing? What thoughts have you been noticing pop up? And in the face of what? What parts of the personality typology have you been noticing? And in the face of what? Where in the body have you been noticing attention arise in response to those thoughts? Every context will carry its own unique energetic signature within the body. Every thought or reactive thought for a particular context will have its very specific energetic signature within the body. So what have you been noticing? Let's have a little bit of a jam in the next 10 minutes or so.
Can you repeat the question, Dan? I'm sorry.
What have you been noticing for the last 7 days? What's been happening in the space of your eye, of your construct, of your personality typology? Any patterns that you've been noticing? What have you been seeing out there in the world? How might that be linked to what's happening in here? Yeah. We had an integration session 7 days ago, so not necessarily reviewing new content, but what have you been noticing for the last 7 days in particular?
Is this in relation to Enneagram or anything?
All of the content so far to this point in the course.
I can break the ice.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
In terms of my dominant typology, which was the 3, which is the achiever, and my virtue is the being authentic, or I'm taking it perhaps less concerned with my sort of the image I might portray. If I question a situation or something that my ego might be telling me, quite often, this is probably telling you something you already know, but quite often being authentic and honest is what sort of feels like the right answer. It ends up being the right way to do it. So I've been really leaning into that, leaning into being more honest and authentic, and not worrying so much about that self image. I really lent into that recently, and it's not that scary. It's not that bad, you know. And in fact, it's been quite helpful, super helpful. So it's
Awesome,
not as
Mel.
scary as I thought it was going to be.
Awesome, Mel. And if you had scenario A, which was maybe the old way of showing up, versus scenario B, and now engaging that truth and authenticity, what's the difference in those two pictures? What's now happening in the moment, and how are you going about actually engaging that authenticity? What have you done to allow yourself to do that, to step into that now?
Taking a lot of moments is what's helping me. I stop and I quite literally take a moment. I've really integrated that into my everyday. That allows me to connect with the me, not the I and the ego and that. And you know how I've noticed it. I've got less tension in my body, in that triangle. Once I do it, take a moment and intentionally just be authentic. As I said, it releases. There is no tension, and there is no worry, almost, you know.
Too easy. Thanks, Mel.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Others? What's playing out for you now? Just sitting there. What do you look to share? Can you speak to what's playing out without necessarily needing an outcome?
I'll share if I may.
That was weird for a second, because Georgina unmuted and opened her mouth, but a different voice was coming out, and I was a little bit confused for a second. I was like, whoa, what's happening? My brain was recognizing. Go for it, Justine.
I'm just having a moment of deja vu, because a few of today nobody had knocked on the door, and I said to my husband, who's knocking? Is there someone knocking? And then someone knocked on the door. Was a little bit weird, but anyway. So my type is, dominant type is type 6, which is basically the skeptic, the loyalist, and the virtue is courage and truth. So I've seen a few things playing out for me. The skepticism, a big one, a huge one. Also, not trusting my own judgment, second guessing myself a lot. And I've had some really lovely moments of courage, I guess. Probably authenticity comes into it too, of just slowing down and recognizing that that's what's playing out, and finding a little bit more peace. It's been really lovely and confronting.
Beautiful, Justine, and that's exactly what we're here for, you know, both those sides of the coin in that sense. And that peace often isn't going to come without going through the very obstacle, rather than trying to find ways around it. So good on you for having the courage to confront that and be with that and find yourself in peace in that sense. The other type 6s, who else is a type 6 here? Hands up. Whose predominant type is type 6? And do you share some of those sentiments or experience some of that as well? Does it sound familiar, what Justine had just shared? We could just get like a thumbs up. It's quite an obvious. Yeah, cool. Thanks for the share, Justine. That in itself, yeah, is an accelerator to express here and have the courage to do so. And you're really tapping into both the other typologies that are of easy access for you, the 3 and the 9, to express here, to have the courage to do so from the 6, and to do so authentically as the 3. Yeah, really beautiful, powerful process there, just expressing, simply expressing here. So yeah, good job. And so we had the first specifically health and well-being practice, which was no screen time. So no screen time up until 12 p.m. or at least no social media, no blue and white screen for the first hour, and no social media that wasn't work related up until 12. How did everyone go with that? Maybe no screen time 1 hour before bed. How did you go? Good? What was your experience, Kate?
It was such an exciting end to the call. I was like, yes, this is going to be like
What a talent.
My circadian rhythm is going to be fully flowing, and I'm just going to have the most beautiful deep sleep, and I'm going to feel not tempted at all to go on my social media because of how excited I was by the benefits that were explained. So I don't struggle with sleep or anything really, but I noticed that the light's on before I go to bed, and I do feel the difference. So for the first day or two up until 12, I wasn't really on scrolling or anything, but I replied to messages, and it's been in the back of my awareness. But didn't happen today or the last 3 days. But screen time before bed was great. I was quite aware of that, but not attached to it being an hour. But I was I felt that opening up, and I felt it was the first 3 days it was working, and then I just so it's been messy, but it's been messy.
Yeah, awesome. And the beautiful practice there for everyone is it's less about the not being on the phone and more about what is it that has us just engage that behavior, to notice the transition from not on the phone, say in the first hour of the day or the final hour of the day, to looking to grab the phone and to scroll, and then to inquire around it. What's so important right now? And is it actually that important? And if it's just aimless sort of picking the phone up, then why am I doing it, kind of thing? And just to notice that, and notice the energy that comes in, the urge to just pick it up, and it's just complete, it's a completely habituated pattern that's playing out there. And it's safe to say that most of us have experienced it to some degree with some level of tech or an app or whatever it might be. So yeah, just explore that urge and notice that the physical response, looking to almost hey, my hand's got a life of its own, and it's all of a sudden scrolling and looking for no reason. So yeah, awesome. I just wanted to bring in also, it wasn't mentioned last week, that in that final hour, to screens are one thing, but also any white light, so looking to if you have white or blue light, that'll reduce the melatonin in your body, and melatonin is our sleep hormone. If you have yellow light on, then it's neutral. It doesn't reduce, but it doesn't release melatonin. And if you have your room be as pitch black as possible whilst you're sleeping, because even say the street light with the blinds open, that bit of light coming in can have you experience a lighter sleep throughout the night because there's just that much less melatonin being released. So just really useful tips there. Cool. Let's move on into today's content, exploring our native perspectives. Okay.
Okay, so quadrants and native perspectives. What we're sharing from today is integral theory, and integral theory is a theory by a philosopher named Ken Wilber, who has produced essentially a meta model. Much of the course content that we've presented so far has come from this meta model. So a meta model simply being a model of models. And so one of the aspects of the integral theory overall model that we're going to go through today is called the quadrants. And we're going to be exploring them really specifically as how we lenses that we view through. So jumping into the next slide, these are the 4 quadrants, and I'll walk you through those in just a minute. And it can look like a lot at the start, but we'll go through it nice and slow. These 4 quadrants are speaking to 4 perspectives that are always available to us in viewing a situation. For each one of the typologies that we have, or for each of us, we'll tend to have a preference for one of these quadrants more so than the others. There's usually, in fact, a primary and a secondary that we're viewing situations through. And there can also be, or there also is, a missing and a longing perspective. And so as we explore these 4 perspectives, just notice for yourself if one of them feels more like it has more of a grip, or it feels a little bit more true or a little bit more relevant than some of the others. There might be a quadrant that you think, oh, that one just doesn't make much sense to me. I don't really know what that one's speaking to. So these 4 quadrants are where our general preferences come from, and they also show us where we're caring from and what we're looking through. So just to walk through the model, and then next what we're going to do is really apply it to a specific situation and practice looking through it. So the model itself on the right, you can see it's a quadrant model. So there's 2 axes. There's the vertical axis going down the middle from individual at the top down to collective down the bottom. So that's speaking to things that are viewing points for one person, and the collective being more than one, the group. On the horizontal axis, we've got subjective on the left-hand side, which is around interior meanings, things that we're experiencing internally. And then objective on the right-hand side of that axis, which is speaking to things that can be looked at or things that can be seen externally. That's just a bit of an intro. So moving into the upper left quadrant, the I quadrant that you can see in the top left, this is the seeing quadrant. And so it's speaking to the individual subjective experience. So what that means is what's going on in the interior individual awareness of one person. So we each have that I space, and it's speaking to thoughts, emotions, memories, states of mind, perceptions, awareness, attention, perspectives, and immediate sensations. All of that is what's going on in the I space. For each of you right now, as you're listening, there's an interior I space that has thoughts and feelings and emotions and a state that's being experienced. Moving down into the lower left quadrant, this is the subjective of the collective. So now we're still in the interior spaces because we're on the left-hand side, but this is speaking to the interior of the collective, which is the cultural space. We call this one the we space, or integral theory does. And so in the we space, what it's speaking to is the shared values, the shared meanings that exist within the group space. It's the feel of the group, the texture and quality of relationships. Language sits in this space here, as well as cultural backgrounds and cultural values as well. Moving into the upper right quadrant, the it space. This is the space of doing. So this is, again, it's the individual. And now we're looking at the objective things that can be seen about an individual. So this includes behaviors, the material body, competencies, skills, and actions, things that are visible and measurable. It's really the realm of that science primarily sits in, being able to look at individual objects. And then moving down into the lower right, we've got the the collective objective. So this is the its space. And we call this one the checking quadrant. So this is the exterior of the collective. And what it's looking at is now all of the systems and networks, the technology, the government, the natural environment, the external aspects of the group that can be seen, the external interactions. So they're the 4 quadrants just really quickly. Now, as we progress through, as an activity, I'd like you all just to think of a recent situation that happened to you, something from the last week or so that you cared a lot about. Anything can come to mind. It doesn't need to be positive or negative. If it's just something that came up, a particular situation that you can apply these quadrants to. Maybe it was a decision that you made or an event that you experienced. Each of these perspectives, as we said, is speaking to where you might be viewing through and therefore caring most about. Also, these 4 quadrants, you might notice the integral health and well-being form that you completed earlier on in this course went through each one of these quadrants. And so all 4 of these are always existing in relation to any situation. The 5th person perspective, which is called the integral perspective, is being able to hold all 4 of these perspectives simultaneously and notice them emerging. And that's something that we dive really deep into in one-on-one coaching. It's something we'll be exploring much more deeply in the next course. But at the moment, what we're really looking at doing is just grounding a bit of an understanding about these 4 and noticing for yourself which might be the primary and the secondary currently playing out. So let's go.
Can everyone see how all 4 of these are present right now and in any given moment? In reality, all 4. You have each individual eye space, what you're thinking, feeling, what's happening, state of mind and perspective on what's being shared. Then we've got the shared space, the collective space, the intersubjective. Yeah, there might be a general feel throughout the group, or when we jump into a group share and we're sharing what's coming up with one another, and there's agreements and disagreements and whatever else might be there. And then we've got the behaviors that we can see, body language that's playing out, the observable behaviors in each person. That's the upper right quadrant. Yeah. And then lower right, we've got the system, right? The overview of the whole session, the overview of the whole course. Right now, the overview of this moment here, everyone collectively sitting here, things being shared, things being done, things being said. And we've got an overview of that, a perspective that's a 4th person perspective, yeah? Not just from the eye, not just from in the other person's shoes, not a person watching 2 people together, but a 4th person perspective on all of those things together playing out.
Okay, so as we look at these quadrants, we can look at them in relation to where we're viewing from. So that primary and secondary quadrants. And where we're viewing from, if it's restricted to 1 or 2 quadrants, what it does is it forms a cognitive bias for how we're viewing a situation, what we might care more about, or what we might preference in relation to a particular situation. So viewing through the quadrants in the I space, a bias for thinking and feeling can exist. So this would be a bias like viewing through own experience and knowledge, what I think and want. There's a confidence and an intention that comes from that space and speaking from confidence and intention. And there can be a my way and I'm right that can come through that I perspective. We're going to explore these through a specific example as well. So an example, if we're going to choose what to eat for dinner, if we're looking through the I quadrant, then that might be, what do I want for dinner right now? What am I preferring? What's my favorite thing to eat? What do I want right now? And that would be looking through the I quadrant at what to eat for dinner. Does that make sense? Anything to add, Dan? No. Looking through the we space, the bias in this space is around connection. So the bias is looking around seeking agreement, what's best for everybody, supporting the group, listening to others, and maintaining relationship as the preference. In relation to dinner, that might look like, well, what do the people around me want? What does my partner want? What would he prefer? What would she prefer? What do my children need? What's best for everybody?
And so just staying on this left-hand side, the way that these two can look, if you're a little heavier and more so in the I space, then really most of the time, most of the decisions you make, it's what you feel should happen, and that reigns supreme in that sense, and that tends to be right. Or if you're heavier in the we space, then you're considering others a fair bit, and often, if you're heavier in the we space, often reigning there, other people's considerations reigning over your own consideration, and your I can get lost. Doesn't need to necessarily, but that's what can happen if there's an over consideration of the we space there. Cool.
Moving into the upper right, we have the it space. And in this space, the bias is around action. It's around doing things, what needs to be done. It can look like being the example or modeling the way. And the preference and what feels most important is what gets said and what gets done. So in relation to dinner, that might be, what would I enjoy making, or what do I need to do to get this started? And then in the it space, down in the bottom right, we've got a bias for fit. So this bias is around looking at the system, looking at the big picture, considering all of the elements. In a workplace, that might look like policies and procedures, and it's really around the variables. So again, in relation to dinner, that might be, well, what's in the fridge? What ingredients do I have? How much time would particular recipes take? Do I need leftovers for work tomorrow? What have I already eaten so far this week? How would this meal fit in? And it's pulling it all together to look at that overview objectively to make the decision. So just pausing for a moment for questions on these 4 perspectives.
Has everyone, as you're exploring this for yourself, are you getting somewhat of a sense as to what your primary and secondary might be? Remember, 2 of these would be pretty strong, and then another 2 would be, one might be missing and one might be longing, which we'll focus more on in the next session.
It's funny, Marion, when you put the first slide up, I was like, oh, it's quite challenging to figure out. Like, I don't know that I could really figure out, but I thought, okay, I'll go with this one and this one as my primary, secondary, this one missing, this one longing. And then when you put this slide up, I was like, oh, I actually nailed it, but I just had to back myself.
Nice.
And so what are you leaning towards, Lou?
I think for my primary, I put doing, the upper right it, and then secondary lower left we sharing. Like, I think for myself, it's like I have to take like for the individual, I have to take that ownership, but for the collective, the we it's more in the connection space. And then the missing, I think, is the systemic, and the longing, I think, is the seeing my own experience.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thanks, Lou.
I thought your example of dinner was really great because it actually helped me understand. I thought, I don't understand this at all, but it's really helped. However, I've got a bit of a trip going on in my head. I'm jumping between I and we. I'm trying to figure out where I'm predominant, and I think I've spent a lot of time predominantly we based, but then also I think I spent a lot of time in I, and I'm wondering, when I thought about it then, I thought, oh, perhaps I'm in the I space, and why it's working for we is because my true I is I want what's best for us. So when I'm really in my I, thinking for myself, what I really want is what's good for not just me, but for me and another person, for me and whoever I'm having food with. So that's why I is taking care of we. Well, I don't know if that's just me. My story attached to that, or what's going on there.
It can be a little tricky, and we've intentionally designed these 2 weeks in this way where we want the self-exploration to happen first. Yeah, so that you're exploring it for yourself, you're inquiring and playing with it, and in the process learning it by getting messy in that sense. In between this week and the next, there's actually a 7-question test that you can do just to give you a bit more of an idea. Obviously, it's not absolute truth in that sense. And then we explore that and gain flexibility next week. Often, Georgina, it's what is it on behalf of? What are your actions or what might be playing out for you, how you might be showing up throughout the day? What are they on behalf of? Is it on behalf of you, or is it on behalf of others in that sense, or getting stuff done, or having everything fit together nice and neatly in your day in that sense, right? So just tuning into that a little bit. Another really useful question is when you first wake up in the morning, actually we'll bring this in a moment. So I'm jumping ahead of time a little bit. I'm wanting to get into conversation with all of you. Keel?
What came up as well is, as we went through the stages of development, we also pointed out the more individual focus and then the collective focus, depending on each stage. So it can refer also to a stage of development if there's more collective focus or more of an individual focus, and it's for you kind of to figure out, is it more a bias in a particular perspective through the quadrants, or has it more to do with a particular stage in terms of values and beliefs that I'm viewing from at the moment, but not so much what happened prior in my life already. So that's why this is so complex, and the integral framework is so complex, because we can't say, oh, it's we, because that's important for you right now. That might actually have emerged maybe 2 years ago when there was more green space coming online, for example, right? So it's just to put all these different elements together and to see what is actually happening here, and what also been true most of the time in your life so far. What can you recognize most of the time, because that will be more of these biases in the quadrants in that sense.
Okay, so we're going to jump into a breakout room, sharing in groups of 4 for 10 minutes, so about 2.5 minutes each, and sharing, where do you feel you typically view from? So think of a recent situation, the one that you thought of earlier, and notice in that situation, what were you viewing through? What felt most important, and how did it affect that situation? What were you caring about? Was it your own preference or your own feelings and thoughts, the thoughts and feelings of others and their preferences, what needed to be done in that situation, or how it could all fit together? So just noticing the viewing in a recent situation, share that within the group. And then for the others in the group, listen and share back, what can you hear in the sharing? Where do you feel from the listening that the other person is living from or viewing that situation through? Any questions on that activity?
So just I'll throw this in there as well. Someone that might be using a lot of we in the language could be indicative of the we space. Quite objective language being indicative of the upper right, or that right-hand side altogether. And a lot of I, and just hearing a lot of, even though we all use that word, but it's the portion with which we use that. So just starting to notice this in others' language as they're sharing, like where do you feel that they're speaking from? And then also sharing where you feel that you're viewing from for that particular situation. Cool. Enjoy.
See you soon.
We have one group of 5.
Maybe can we make that 2 and 3?
Sure. Don't go anywhere, folks. I'll just do that a second. Okay, I should be doing it now. See you in a bit, everyone.
Everyone wants to know, I had a one-on-one coaching call with Lee today, and she was there at the hairdresser, which was full of noise, full of distraction. So it was a beautiful experience. It looks beautiful, Lee. So, exploring your native perspectives. What did you hear, and where do you feel that you are viewing reality from? Or through?
I'll go.
Go for it, Mike.
So I'm very much on the right-hand side, exterior, third and fourth quadrant, which can be great because I can see network systems very quickly. These integral maps come very naturally to me. And I find it easy to then apply things to self. Well, I think I can. But the problem is that it's at the expense of the left-hand side, and especially the eye, to the point where I can lean so heavily on that side, I don't even trust an eye experience. I just like, I won't even let myself feel or experience anything. And so I just have this distrust of the eye space. So I'll lean even more onto the right-hand side, which enhances that side. It actually then makes that side even more developed. But it's at the expense of the other side. So learning to discovering that. And the trouble is with that is that when I don't allow myself to feel authentically and experience the eye, I can become confrontational, aggressive, uncentered, fractured, and people, especially those close to me, then really cop it, right? And that's the pathological side of that dysfunction. But the great thing is that I'm working on it now. So becoming aware of that, and then making an effort to try and balance out the other side. So not saying, well, the right side is better than the other. It's about trying to bring those weak sides up. But it takes work, as you know. So there you go.
Mike, that's really beautiful, because for someone that's so on the right, or the thinking patterns, behavioral patterns are so on the right, to express in the way that you did, quite authentically, is very much engaging the eye, and that's leaning into that eye space. And then something else you spoke to there, and this is for everyone, and this is very similar to the 9 typologies of the Enneagram. As a human being, we have the capacity to access and have flexibility to access all 4 quadrants and beyond. Yeah, but we're focusing on these 4 quadrants. Our current set of habituated thinking and behavioral patterns will be lying predominantly in 1 and 2 of those quadrants. And so to gain flexibility, we want to be able to, depending on the situation at hand, access whichever quadrant is most suitable, or combination of quadrants in that sense. Yeah. And this is, imagine, having a hammer, but you need a screwdriver. But you only have a hammer and know how to use a hammer, and the only way to attend to that situation is using a screwdriver. What's going to happen? You'll be frustrated, annoyed, you'll feel not so valuable, right? Self-worth can go down and just feel like you're not good enough, which is not the case whatsoever. And so, it's about gaining flexibility, being able to easily access all 4 in that sense. And we don't have to be amazing at accessing the others, but we, like you said, just evening out the playing field for ourselves through that.
And also, Mike, thank you for sharing. And also, what kind of came forward in your sharing, from this perspective at least, is that it's not necessarily comfortable, right, to lean into other sides of this quadrant. So wherever there's discomfort, wherever you notice these frictions, that's where the potential actually lies. Like it's not going to feel comfortable to lean into other sides, especially if we're used to a particular preference from a particular quadrant. It's going to just feel more true, or more, this is just more true, more relevant, more than that at least. And that's the discomfort, and to overcome that and to see through that, that's the honesty, and with yourself, with this work as well.
Don't even start to hope that, oh, I might get away with it being, I'm speaking to everyone here, with it being easy and comfortable to lean into the others. It's just not going to be. It's going to be feel odd and feel like you're riding a bike with your eyes closed. Right? So, yeah, awesome. Let's hear from a few others as to where you feel, because this session here is really about just getting a pretty good idea as to where you feel you're viewing from predominantly. And then in the next session, we really speak to leaning into your potential and leaning into the other quadrants. Nathaniel, what do you reckon?
So I think I was coming from the I space and the it space, I think. And that was mainly brought up by a situation that happened last week where my car engine blew up on the side of a 4-lane highway and I couldn't do much about it. And so I was a little bit frustrated, but noticing that I couldn't really do anything about it. But yeah, also taking into the fact that I needed to do something about it to sort of get through that situation. So yeah, I think I was coming from the I space and the it space of what practically needs to happen in that situation.
Yeah, that sounds pretty true. And then exploring how doing so, coming from those two spaces, might positively or negatively influence, how it simply influences other areas of your life. Yeah. And then the benefits of potentially leaning into the other quadrants.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, brother.
I might also ask, why do we want to have flexibility throughout these quadrants, right? Why is it even useful? And again, that is, if there's particular friction in particular areas of your life, you just don't get shit done. It's just like, whoa, it's not happening. That's a missing it, for example, right? Or it's just relationships are not really working. That's the we. So it's just what is potentially just not working in your life, or it's just systems out there, I kind of get it, but why worry about that shit? Like, not going there. So it's just to notice these preferences and where is there friction happening in life? Where is it not smooth? Where is it not easy to access this? And that's the places to look for potentially missing and longing. And also what comes easy and what is your strengths and how can you amplify that in particular ways, right? So that's also, if there's particular strengths in particular areas, how beautiful. Embrace that.
Can I add one thing?
Go for it.
Noticing where it is in the body that's pointing to the exclusion of whatever the quadrant is. So for me, it's the I quadrant. So for example, this week, pain in my chest all week to the point yesterday I thought I was going to have a stroke. Realizing that I was not letting myself feel in my heart. My heart was crying out, saying, hello, trying to get my attention, right? This is like the heart space trying to get my attention, saying, hello, pay attention. And me going, no, it's the fourth quadrant. No, it's systems, facts, figures, objectives, blah, blah, blah. And totally ignoring the feeling part, that heart space. And it wasn't till somebody said to me, in your heart, it's like, holy shit, I've just realized I was totally blinded subject to looking through the fourth quadrant. I wasn't even seeing that I was weak in the I quadrant.
And to this point, it sounds like there's a longing for the eye, actually, if we were to, but this session's here more so about identifying the primary and the secondary, but yeah, sounds like there's some awareness of the eye, but there's a longing for it. There's been very little, a little bit has been shared about the we, but yeah, cool. We're going to be listening in to be able to support you in getting as clear on this as possible as well. And it's awesome if everyone can listen into everyone else sharing and hear where you feel that they're coming from. Paula, you had something?
Yeah, I had a situation this week with work where I'd spoken to one of my team members who was a bit frustrated about around changes that have been made in the team and where we were going and what the structure looked like going forward, which in turn led me to be very frustrated with my boss because I'd spoke to him asking him for some guidance, where we need to go, what we need to do. So I noticed that I was very much in the we space, but kind of being projected from the I. But I also realised that I'm very much in the doing. Normally that's where I go to, and I think I was most frustrated because I couldn't do. So I got very frustrated because it was kind of out of my hands and I wanted to do something about it. So it led to a lot of frustration. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, really good pickup there. And that's what it's really about, moving forward into the next 7 days to see how these quadrants are playing out for you every day, right? When you first wake up in the morning, what's the first thing that you're considering? Is it, how am I feeling? Was that a good night's sleep? So on and so on. Or are you immediately considering others? How is everyone? The first thing, is that the first thing you do when you wake up? Or are you thinking about, okay, what do I need to do today? Or lower right, are you thinking about, okay, so what's on for the day and when do I need to take these people? Cool, and I need to do that there. And cool, how's it all fitting together, the overview of the day? Yeah, just start to notice that for yourself. Go off and do the native perspectives test, and we're going to bring that into next week in a really juicy session as well. Yeah. Yes, we will offer up some copy of those quadrants so you can explore that and have that as a reference point as well. Okay. Beautiful. Yeah, this is kind of midway through our session here today. Integral health and well-being. We're exploring the nervous system, and now given that we've spoken to quadrants, we may as well start pointing to which quadrant we are attending to. So we are attending to the upper right quadrant because we are speaking to the nervous system, something that is observable, something like cells and matter is all upper right quadrant stuff. Yeah, something that we could take put under a microscope will fall into the upper right quadrant in that sense. So we are talking about a very, very specific nerve here. Does anyone know which nerve this is? Pictured on the right-hand side. Unmute and let your voices be heard.
The vagus.
Who was that?
Me.
Yay, vagus nerve. Beautiful, a magical, magical nerve. So we're going to speak to the magic of this nerve and how a lot of what we've already been doing has been attending to a healthy vagus nerve in that sense. And so the vagus nerve, it's actually the longest nerve in the body, and vagus means wanderer, because as you can see in that picture, it innervates so many different parts of the body, from the lungs to the heart, the gut. And it is the very connection between mind and gut, between brain and gut, creating the brain-gut axis. Because it innervates those parts of the body, it influences our breathing, our digestive function, and our heart rate. And it's why what we're thinking can directly influence our gut health and our gut health can directly influence our mind. And so vagal tone, whenever we reference vagal tone simply represents the activity of the vagus nerve. How active is the vagus nerve? How well are we activating the vagus nerve? And so what are the reasons for looking to increase vagal tone, to stimulate the vagus nerve? We would want to stimulate it to send a message to your body that it's time to relax and de-stress, which leads to long-term improvements in mood, well-being, and resilience. Increasing your vagal tone activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the slowing down of the brain waves, activating parasympathetic versus sympathetic, which is flight or flight, on. And remember, as we're lowering through brain waves, all we're looking to do is make the switch into parasympathetic so that we can digest our food, so that we can rest and recoup and not be on constantly. A higher vagal tone means that your body can relax faster after stress. The way that we measure someone's fitness is get them to run on a treadmill for 20 minutes, and then it's not actually how well they do whilst being on the treadmill, but rather how quickly do they recover. Now that's the same for any other human being. You don't need to be an athlete. The health of your vagal tone depends on how quickly you recover after stress. And if you're finding yourself really needing a few days to recover from a bit of stress, right, or a stressful day, then maybe there's some work to be done around the vagal tone and the vagus nerve. And it's a beautiful way of regulating our mood and inflammation in the body. And any form of stress, mental, cognitive stress, causes the body to release cortisol. It's actually the cortisol that in response to that, it's actually the cortisol that then allows the body to stay in that heightened stress, but it can't do that, and it's not sustainable, can't do it long term. Any sustained level of stress, physical or mental or emotional, will have an increased level of cortisol, and therefore the response to cortisol tends to be inflammation, whether that's in the body, whether that's in the brain. And when we speak about, and you hear, it might be spiritual woo-woo, but manifesting your mental stresses in your body somewhere, this has a huge role to play in it. This was a really interesting piece, and that I thought I'd add in here. The vagal response reduces stress. It reduces our heart rate and blood pressure. It changes the function of certain parts of the brain and stimulates digestion, all those things that happen when we are relaxed. And really interesting thing is that there's studies that have shown that vagal tone is passed on from mother to child. Mothers who are depressed, anxious, and angry during the pregnancy have lower vagal activity. And once they give birth to their child, the newborn also has low vagal activity and low dopamine and serotonin levels, right? Right? However, this is not a static thing. The reason we wouldn't be bringing this up if it's not something that we can work on, and we can absolutely shift the health and the state of our vagus nerve in that sense, and its capacity to regulate mood, regulate hormones, and regulate mind and body, so that this vessel can stay as healthy as possible throughout our entire life, so that we can step into this life being of service in whatever way that might be, whether it's as a mother, as a father, as in the work that we're doing, whatever it is. So how do we stimulate the vagus nerve? Any ideas? Unmute.
So humming, I think. Humming one.
You've been stealing the slides, haven't you?
But what about like touching your ears? I've heard of that before. I'm not sure about that one.
Wuza? Has anyone watched Bad Boys with Martin Lawrence and Woozah? It's like Woozah, and he does that calming effect where he rubs his ears because his psychologist asked him to do that. Maybe from that, maybe that's where you got it from, Michelle. But but that's, I'm sure that it does. It's not on the list here though, so you haven't stolen our slides. And so we increase vagal tone through slow, rhythmic, deep breathing. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Unless you've been asleep for the last 7 weeks, that should be super familiar. So hopefully you've been practicing that. Yeah, just it's really about practicing it, even if it's 3 minutes every day, but you're practicing it every day, because it's unlikely that you were doing that prior to on a really consistent basis. Nasal breathing, again, we've been looking to breathe through the nose, keep the mouth closed, keep the jaw open and tongue gently rested on the roof of the mouth. That helps release nitric oxide, which is a natural relaxant in the body. And also that entire process occurs as a result of stimulating the vagus nerve. Meditation and body awareness, letting go of tension. So, the last 2 weeks of our practice in that sense. And then humming and gargling. And so it's whilst thousands of years worth of observation of the body through Eastern philosophy and teachings, they may not have had access to science and technology in that way, but it was a different form of technology where they were observing what was actually happening, and the nature, ontological nature of the body, of the mind, and of this existence. And why I'm saying all of that is Om isn't just a cool sounding sound in that sense. There's a reason why you'd have the monks humming or chanting Om. And it just allows for a downregulation in an open state to occur. Yeah. And so it's beautiful. She's Helena's place, Helena Norberg Hodge. She's going to be on our digital event, Economics of Happiness. She spent time in Ladakh, really beautiful, beautiful human being full of wisdom. Went to her house and had lunch there. And I'd never done this before, but her and her partner kind of said, oh, do you mind if we do 3 Oms before we eat lunch? And knowing all of this, I was like, that makes complete sense. And and she's not necessarily, a super, super hippie spiritual person or whatever else, but 3 Oms. And what that meant is we down-regulated the nervous system into the parasympathetic and actually were then ready to digest food. Yeah. How often do you see people running out of the gym, chugging down their protein shake? So they're in sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and they're chugging down the protein shake. The body's not even ready to receive it. But you don't have to be going to the gym for that to be happening. Who here has a full days or full morning's worth of work, grabs their lunch, hasn't taken a moment to slow down and starts eating their lunch really quickly, right? Take a moment, take a moment, take a moment, and allow the body, smell your food just for 10 seconds, right? You'll start to salivate, and that's preparing your body to digest. Yeah, these are all things we should have all been taught at school, like basic human things. And so hopefully we can go off and share these with others. We're going to try some humming and then cold water exposure, which you're all going to love, and exercise. So if we can all unmute right now, and we're not necessarily going to do an Om. Don't want to make everyone feel super uncomfortable, but we're going to take a deep breath in and just a big loud sigh all the way out. Really vocal sigh, okay? Notice what's happening in the mind, maybe a bit of hesitancy or whatever else. That's all good. Let's take a deep breath in and Oh. Now, if you're sitting there telling me that you are not feeling better after that, we can have a chat after this session. And so the Integral Health and well-being practice
Oh,
for this week will be to do a Seth and along with attention awareness. It's an attention awareness practice. So finish your shower with 30 seconds of cold. Okay, now that's going to be real tough for those in the upper hemisphere. All right. You can have your warm shower as per normal and then go straight into the cold for 30 seconds. Now, this is a practice. It's got two benefits. One being you'll just immediately, and if you can allow the cold water to be hitting the upper back, because in that area we store a fair bit of brown fat cells, and it allows for brown fat cell production, and brown fat cells aid a healthy immune system. So if you can allow the cold water to hit your upper back there, then you're going to be stimulating brown fat cell production. And don't worry, you're not going to get fat from stimulating these brown fat cells. It's a different type of fat. And the second benefit to this is mental resiliency. Notice what's happening in your mind the few moments before you look to turn off the hot water, the hesitancy. And can you choose to simply be in a state of calm and ease as it hits and actually start to explore with your mind, what is cold and where is it coldest, and not be in a state of contraction? It's a beautiful, beautiful practice of mental resiliency. And you'd rather do that to yourself than go out into your day and have someone spray some words out at you. But once you've gone through that in the morning, you feel unbeatable, because there's nothing anyone else could do that would be worse than that for those that aren't used to it at that point in time. Yeah. So have fun with the cold shower. See if you can get 7 from 7, and we can share our experiences in 7 days' time. Any questions around that? Unmute if you do. I can't see everyone, but otherwise, good. Cool. Now, attention versus awareness. Here, we're delving into the first quadrant. Yeah, that I space. The internal subjective. So what's the difference between attention and awareness? Yeah. You can't control anything that arises within the space of your awareness. Whether it's a sound, whether it's my voice, whether it's an itch, a bodily sensation, you don't control any of it. A thought, you don't even control a thought. You've never sat there gone, okay, now this thought on cue, in you go. Oh, yep, there it is. They arise, right, within your awareness. However, we can choose what we pay attention to when it comes to the things that arise within our awareness, including pain, including what someone has said, what part of what someone has said. We're going to take a moment to just experience how we are actually not in control of anything that arises within our awareness, but that we can choose what we are paying attention to or not paying attention to. So sitting there, it's only going to be a short one here, 3 minutes or so, getting comfortable and closing your eyes for a moment. Taking a deep breath in and through the nose. As you sit there, allowing your breath to simply do what it does. Allowing yourself to drop into open awareness. And noticing that which arises within your awareness. Might be a thought arising within the space that is your awareness. A sensation, your face, the sensation of the atmosphere gently pressing up against your face. Sounds seemingly happening out there, however, arising in the same space as your thoughts, as your feelings and sensations, the space that is your awareness. Which of these do you pay attention to? Which of these do you attend to? Notice we say, which of these do you attend to, and not which of these grabs your attention. Because you have a choice as to what you choose to attend to and pay attention to. Is there a need to attend to any of it? Or can we simply watch it silently from the seat of awareness, watching it fall away of its own accord in the same way that it arose of its own accord? Notice the subtle difference of energy between sitting in the seat of awareness, allowing all to arise and fall away within the space that is awareness, versus the subtle energy shift associated with attending to that which arises within awareness, paying attention to that which arises within awareness. Where would you like to be spending more time? Gently, when you're ready, opening your eyes. Seek and you shall find. You've probably heard this saying before. Now, the human brain is definitely not designed to make us happy. It's over 2 million years old, and it is designed for survival, to seek out a problem out there in the environment so that it doesn't become a threat to its survival. Now we live in a society that's incredibly comfortable. Yeah. Relatively speaking, there's still suffering, mental suffering. But if environmentally, if, you know, talking about the external world, we're in Western society pretty comfortable, pretty darn comfortable. But that part of the brain hasn't necessarily evolved. And so it continues to seek for something to be wrong, to be up. It just doesn't have a saber-toothed tiger to focus its attention on anymore. And so we create problems left, right, and center of a whole bunch of different things. And so start to notice what you're paying attention to. If you're feeling triggered, annoyed, frustrated, what are you choosing to pay attention to here? And what would it look like with that very same thing if you brought a sense of appreciation into the fold? Simply asking the question, okay, if there has to be something that I could be appreciative for here, what could that be? Yeah. What you focus on expands. This was taught to me by my football coach, soccer coach, when I was 16 years old. I would really lose my shit whenever I made a poor pass in a football match, right? And I'd like be really hard on myself. And then the rest of the game was just horrible. And he had actually said, what you focus on expands. So the second something doesn't seem right, if you continue focus on what went wrong, then what went wrong will continue to expand. If you stop for a moment and ask yourself, is that a useful thought? No. What would be a more useful thought? Well, what would that look like if it worked out in a more useful way, worked out in a more effective way? How would I do that pass more effectively? And if you focus on that, that's what starts to expand. And you can turn an entire game around, you can turn an entire day around, and you can turn an entire life around by placing your focus on that. And this is really resilience. Resilience is, you know, in the midst of it, back against the ropes. Do you choose to focus on the pain? Do you allow the pain to be there because it's just there anyway? And what's the most useful thought that you can bring in? What do you choose to focus on in that moment? When you're under that shower and it's super, super cold, do you fully go into a state of awareness and allowing it to be cold without focusing on the thought of how cold it is and how much you don't like cold in that sense? Really beautiful, practical practice there. But if you can do it with the cold shower, it will positively transfer and become a cross-contextual skill that you end up having even with your emotions, and being able to, like, a trigger is no different to the sudden cold shower. Just hits you, and being able to allow it to play out and choose what you focus on. We're going to have a listen to this. Where are we at? Beautiful. To this beautiful little piece from Alan Watts. He's a philosopher. Yeah, really influenced a fair bit of our work early on in days, a few years back, but still, you know, it's simply truth. And so we'll listen to this 3-minute clip on the mind from Alan Watts. Let me know if this is too loud. We'll play it for 5 seconds. Can everyone hear that?
So then let's consider first of all, what is a mind?
Is it too loud? No? Pretty good? Cool.
It could be a little bit, from this end at least, a little bit softer. It was quite
sensitive creature. All right, beautiful. Put it down.
So now, can you allow your mind to be quiet? Isn't it difficult? Because the mind seems to be like a monkey, jumping up and down and jabbering all the time. Once you've learned to think, you can't stop. And an enormous number of people devote their lives to keeping their minds busy and feel extremely uncomfortable with silence. When you're alone, nobody's saying anything, there's nothing to do. There's this worry, this lack of distraction. I'm left alone with myself, and I want to get away from myself. I'm always wanting to get away from myself. That's why I go to the movies, that's why I read mystery stories, that's why I go after girls or anything that you do, or get drunk or whatever. I don't want to be with myself. I feel queer. So, well, why do you want to run away from yourself? What's so bad about it? Why do you want to forget this? Why do you want to become yourself? Because you are addicted to thoughts. This is a drug, a real dangerous one. Compulsive thinking, going on and on and on and on and on all the time. It's a habit. So there's a difficulty about stopping that activity. And you really have to stop it if you want to be sane. Because if I talk all the time, I don't hear what anyone else has to say. Then I'll end up in the situation of having nothing to talk about but my own talking. Or so in exactly the same way, if I think all the time, I won't have anything to think about except thoughts. So in order to have something to think about, there are times when you simply must stop thinking. Well, how do you do that? The first rule is don't try to. Because if you do, you will be like someone trying to make rough water smooth with a flat iron. And all that will do will stir it up. So in the same way as a muddy, turbulent pool quiets itself when left alone, you have to know how to leave your mind alone. It will quiet itself.
So taking a breather now, and any thoughts that came up in response to that little clip there, or anything around attention, awareness, the vagus nerve. What does what Alan had to say mean for you in your everyday? What can you shift? What can you change in how you approach things, even if it's a small, tiny shift?
I noticed that I felt really sad when I heard him express how so many people will spend their life thinking, or that's how I understood it. And I felt really deep sense of sadness about that some people won't experience peace. And then I wondered if that was me in my eye feeling the sad in the system, but thinking about the system, or other, thinking about other being sad, is that then my sadness? Of course it's mine because it's inside me. But if I'm feeling sad because I'm perceiving someone else's suffering, I don't know what my question is, although they're not suffering if they don't think they are. I'm creating their suffering by thinking that they're suffering. And then when I let that be, and I was grateful for the fact that I was thinking and feeling that, I noticed loads of energy in my body. I sometimes noticed like racing up and down my body. So yeah, it was pleasant.
Yeah, thanks, Georgina. And it's really simple in that sense, and we can kind of map it out and put it down on paper in a way that, and it was in what you had shared, that when you'd thought about what people might be going through and so on, it was that thinking that then generated a level of suffering on your end. But it was in response to what you were thinking about what other people, it wasn't wasn't a reality where you are right now in that sense, right? In the room that you're sitting in and so on. So it was mentally generated low level suffering that you were then experiencing, or to whatever degree suffering. Yeah. So you're not necessarily experiencing their suffering, and it was in response to the thought that you were having. Yeah. Does that make sense?
And also, Georgina, what you already are is fully free already. And there's no discrimination in what you are, so there are no others. That's a construct of mind as well.
More in
you're
that,
ready
of course,
for
too.
you, especially you, Georgina, you know that. No others. Because then there's a self.
Course 2, if anyone's interested. Anyone else I would like to share?
So he says, to still the waters, you need to leave the mind alone. To leave the mind alone is what I perceive is just to stop the thoughts, but it's not a doing. You can't stop the thoughts. You just have to be. I think that's a question. I'm trying to work that out in my mind, because you can't actively stop thoughts, because if you said you can't think your way out of thinking. So in that case, we're speaking to sitting in awareness, but not latching onto anything. Yeah?
Buddha, already alive within you.
Yeah. I
So
like this.
So
Yeah.
seat of awareness,
Yeah.
the me, the seat of awareness, and in that little sitting that we did earlier on, all that arises within the space that is your awareness, whether you feel that it's happening inside of you, your thoughts and feelings and sensations, or whether it's happening out there, sounds or whatever else, is all happening within the space that is your awareness, one space, all of it. Yeah. And it's to be in that space of awareness. And remember, there's moments in between things arising in that sense. What's happening there?
When you say these things, it makes so much sense. And this is going to sound a bit strange, or maybe it won't, but it's like you say it and then I think, oh yeah, I already knew that, but I didn't know it a minute ago. You know what I mean?
Because it's realized.
I did know it. You're right. I did. Yeah.
this is all this with all of this, it's already known.
Yeah.
It's just you're remembering
Yes.
that this is true for you already. We're not learning anything new here. So it's already intrinsically known within each and every one of us on this call here. And it's to realize with real eyes what is already true, which is there's nothing there, right? Something, distraction, something here, something there, something this, something that. That's the thoughts spinning around and around and around and around. That's what he said also. Just nothing. Most people are so afraid of just being in nothing. No drama, nothing to do. Nothing.
And what is it that's afraid, right? No one's actually afraid of being in silence and in nothing, because our truest state is that. It'd be like a fish being afraid to be a fish, or water being afraid to be water. That is our true state, but it's the identity that we take ourselves to be, the construct that freaks the hell out. No one here is freaked out ever. No one here is frustrated ever. No one here is angry ever. Only the construct, the constructed part of the mind is the one that experiences all of that. Now we're speaking to those qualities. There are deeper qualities of being, such as sorrow, such as love, that can come through. It's not like you become a robot, yeah. But that typically what we're experiencing on a day-to-day around frustration, annoyance, anger, and so on, mind generated, only within the mind, yeah.
There's a potentially useful analogy with parenting. Something that came through a little while ago from here was around seeing the self, taking the position of the self as a bit of a parent for the ego having a tantrum. And, you know, some parents can allow their child, their toddler, to scream and shout and try and get their own way and not ignore them, but also not entertain their energy and simply allow them to let it pass. And so that can potentially be a way for us to position as self, be as that true self, and allow the ego stories and narratives to play out without needing to engage with them or have them be how we interact with the reality.
It can even be a narrative that there is a narrative.
What is there if it's simply not a narrative?
It's not even a narrative.
Now we're starting what we're speaking to, and we're starting to edge on, you know, that curve that we showed in regards to ego development. It's where it starts to edge to the very top of the arc there and starts to make its way over into the clearing and unbecoming. And that's where we're going to be focusing the next course on, is that sort of wedge of the arc there, mastering being. Likely what the course is going to be called. It's also what we're going to be delving into pretty deeply with the retreat that's coming up around restlessness, avoidance, attachment, slothness, doubt, and how these are distractions of the mind away from that absolute pristine nothingness and awareness. Now, nothingness doesn't sound too attractive, does it? Particularly to the construct. What do you mean nothingness? I've been spending all of this energy and money to be a somebody and show up in the world like a significant someone. What is available to you from the space of nothingness? From the vastness of nothingness, what is available to you? What possibility? You got it, Ness.
Everything.
Yeah. All possibility. Now how attractive does We need to use the ego a little bit to get ourselves in there. Now, how attractive does nothingness sound? All possibility available to you. If you go into somethingness, look at what we do to our options, to our possibility. Distractions. Where do you want to be living from? It's a practice, yeah? We start with the morning practice and hopefully extending that time so that we can mature into that space, that it's no longer weird to be in that space of open awareness, so that we can really start to spend more time and live from that place more and more in our day-to-day lives with a state of ease. So let's spend the next 5 to 7 minutes closing our eyes and just allowing ourselves to be in that state. You've all done the breath work. You've all done letting go of tension. Continue to allow that to play out and just practice being there in open awareness, allowing things to arise and fall away. Closing your eyes, allowing the tension to melt away. And allowing whatever arises as we go into an extended period of silence, simply arise, knowing there is nothing to do about it. And relax, release, and return. Relax, release, and return. You become aware that you're thinking. Relax, release, and return to the breath. Letting any tension melt away. be between the thoughts, between the sounds. There's a wandering mind. And allow yourself for the next 4 breaths to simply be with the breath every step of the way, every moment, riding the breath all the way out as it turns, all the way in as it turns, all the way out. And choose to pay attention to the breath and show diligence there. When you're ready, gently opening your eyes. Taking your time coming out of it, particularly at home when you're sitting, when the gong goes off, allowing yourself to sit with the very end of that gong until you can't hear it anymore. Then noticing if there's an urge to get up and just start doing. Just taking your time actually over the next 60 to 90 seconds. Georgina, you were talking about how you were referencing Alan Watts now. You were realizing how many people are actually incessantly thinking. Yeah, and that kind of reminded me of something that Seth had shared with us earlier today, where he went to the butcher and asked Seth what he does, and Seth's doing some coaching in this space and so on, and the butcher asks, "Oh, what sort of coaching? Who's it for?" Right? It really is the answer there would be, well, do you experience incessant thinking? Do you experience thinking, sometimes worrying and frustration and anger? And do you experience that? If he answered yes, unless it was a Buddha, realized Buddha doing the butchery, it's likely that he is. This work is really for everyone, particularly in Western society. The work we're doing on this course, the one-on-one work, it's why it's expanding so quickly, this space, because there for so long was an unrealized need for this, because on the surface we're all so comfortable in Western society. Everything was sweet, we're all going about our days, everything's fine, and there's this like low grade constant release of cortisol through the body. Yeah, ducks paddling, that's right. So if it feels true to you already now, you don't even need to wait until the end of the course to be reaching out to your Yes and coach and engaging that work. Plenty on the call here that already are. Yeah, so if you have any questions about that process, let us know. We're going to finish off on this slide here. So this week's practice, self-awareness practice, taking the native perspective test. It's a 7-question test. Will literally take no longer than 2 minutes or so, 2-3 minutes. And then journal once a day, something you are grateful for. Shifting from expectation to appreciation. Well, I expect it to be this way. Well, what are you actually appreciative for? What happens when you shift expectation into appreciation? Then the integral health and well-being practice, really looking forward to hearing people's experiences with this. Finishing your shower with 30 seconds cold. Mental resilience, activating and increasing that vagal tone, all of the benefits, even hum whilst you're under that cold water. See how much you can weird the people out around you. And continue to deepen that sitting practice, 5 to 15 minutes a day. Yeah, all the work you've done to this point is for now to allow you and familiarize yourself with that practice. Allow yourself to dip into a bit of that courage and realize that actually sitting in silence for 15-20 minutes ain't so bad. However, the most important thing, developing it as a habit still. If it's just too much of a barrier, even 10 seconds a day would be useful in developing it as a habit. Week 9, so in 2 weeks' time, the session will be on the Monday rather than the Tuesday. We have a bunch of people on this call that are attending retreat, and half the team will be on retreat as well. So just letting you know that. And Lawrence, you had something you want to share?
So we've been exploring the quadrant model, and it's an incredible tool for viewing reality in many different contexts and experiences. And on Thursday, Yes and have a workshop which is called Integral Ecology, and it's essentially going to be a blend of integral theory and quite specifically the quadrant model as a way of viewing the systems, which are both the living and non-living systems that make up the world that we live in. And so if there's an interest in showing up for the planet and understanding a bit more about what is happening in the world and our perception of the world from the subjective and also the happenings in the objective, then we're going to be exploring and playing with integral ecology through some guided meditations and through some discussions and through some other kind of group processes to really explore a practical and specific use of the integral model through something that's really important and alive for me at the moment, which is connecting to the living world. So yeah, we'd love to see some of you there. It's going to be Thursday evening for the UK. Oh yeah, there's the link. Thursday evening for Australia, Thursday morning for UK. There are the times just there, so it'd be great to see you there.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Ness, did you have a question? No? Looks like
A lot of thoughts running through my head.
Cool. Don't stick the hand in. Trying to stop it. Cool. Reach out if you need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.